On behalf of Brian and myself, I'm honored to acknowledge that we are currently recording on the traditional land of the Anishinaabe. The Anishinaabe include the Ojibwe, Odawa, and Potawatomi nations, collectively known as the Three Fires Confederacy. CFS Counseling and Wellbeing and United Way Simcoe Muskoka respect Indigenous history and culture and are dedicated to moving forward in the process of reconciliation with all First Nation, Métis, and Inuit people.
Welcome to Resilience Rising, the show that shatters poverty myths, sparks optimism, and fuels innovative change through community-inspired discussions.
I'm Amanda Fellows, the Manager of Community Programs at CFS Counseling and Wellbeing.
And I'm Brian Shelley, the Chief Executive and Philanthropy Officer at United Way Simcoe Muskoka.
The title of today's episode is Aging with Dignity, Addressing Older Adult Poverty. More than 9,000 older adults in Simcoe County are living in poverty, with those living alone more vulnerable than those living with family. At 10%, the poverty rate for older adults in Simcoe County is almost double the national rate. In this episode, we're going to explore the critical issue of poverty among older adults and the challenges they face in aging with dignity. We delve into the complex factors contributing to older adult poverty and discuss innovative solutions to support an aging population. Joining us in this vital conversation today is Jenna Wickens, a certified professional consultant on aging and the Mature Minds coordinator at CFS Counseling and Wellbeing. Welcome to Resilience Rising, Jenna.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Awesome. So before we get started, you're a certified professional consultant of aging, on aging.
Yes.
Not of aging, on. What is that?
So it is an actual certification. I didn't find something online. I didn't make it up. Well, I did find it online, but it is a Canadian organization called Age Friendly Businesses that provide a number of courses that you can go through and get this certification. Basically, it develops knowledge on what it means to get older because it's happening to all of us. We're all getting older.
Whether we like it or not.
Whether we like it or
It is
not.
happening.
Preferably that we'd like it more than less.
Right, sure.
Right.
Yeah.
So that is the certification. It helps me to understand some of the barriers, some of the challenges, some of the joys, the opportunities, in addition to the liabilities.
And so you learn something new every day. I had no idea that this certification existed. Could you explain how this works, or how this certification dovetails with the work that you're doing with CFS Counseling and Wellbeing?
Oh, absolutely, I can. So at CFS, we value people, we value individuals. And when I entered into this role, I didn't realize how ageist I was. So I like to say I'm a recovering ageist, and we all are, because we all have had messages.
Or
on
we're
ageism.
not.
Or we're not.
Right.
Yeah. Right, true.
Yeah.
I should say
we're
we're
either
all
an ageist or recovering.
Recovering. Yeah, there's no one who's not ageist at some point, for sure. So with this knowledge base, with this foundation, the certification, having an understanding of some of the things that we face as we get older. Mm-hmm. Notice I'm not saying that they face as older adults because we're all doing it.
We're all in the same progression.
We're all in the same progression. It's coming for all of us. And so our view on that has to change. And when we were developing this program, all of the things that Mature Minds encompasses.
So maybe before we stop, what is this program?
What is this program?
What is Mature Minds?
Well, Mature Minds at its foundation, at its core, is about valuing older adults in our community. Okay. I like to have my hands in lots of different things. So it involves volunteer opportunities for older adults. It involves innovative community programs that celebrates aging. It involves some community resource consultation, but at the core of all of it is ageism and ageism awareness. And so using this certification, using this knowledge, background, and base, we're able to go into communities and professional organizations and talk with recreational groups about what ageism is and how that plays into all of these different facets of life, including poverty, and what that looks like for older adults who experience this on a day-to-day basis. So that's how it plays in. I could talk for an hour just on all the things that we get to do with CFS with older adults, but I won't do that because it will take all of our time.
Why do you use the term older adults as opposed to like senior or like that common language? Because I mean, older adults was new for me, certainly, as opposed to using the term senior. So I'm just curious why you use that language.
Thank you for asking. So there's nothing inherently wrong with the word senior. We use it all of the time. But when we think about the age range of seniors, we're talking 50 years. 55 to 105. Our life expectancy in Canada on average is 87. So that's a huge span of time. And there has been a study that came out that on a spectrum of words about older adults, that on one end of people being seen as dependent and frail and weak and sick and not useful to our society is the word seniors.
Right.
And on the other end of people who are independent and contributing and valuable members of society is the term older adults. And so we use older adults because even in using that, we're reminding people that they have value, that you are contributing, that we are, as we get older, not to be put on the shelf, that we are people who have experience, that have wisdom, that have, well, that can also be ageist, because we know that not everyone who's older is wise. There's some older people who are not wise, but to not put everyone in one category. And seniors, unfortunately, does that. It puts everyone in a large age bracket into one category and assumes that the needs across that age category are the same.
Yeah.
We don't do that with any other age. We wouldn't put 1-year-olds and 56-year-olds in the same age category. And even then, you can have a 55-year-old who has needs that an 85-year-old does not, and vice versa. So that's why we say older adults.
It's interesting because I feel like, when you describe that, first of all, the concept of ageism isn't, we don't talk about it in the same way that we talk about, sexism or all of the other isms. We don't talk about ageism as kind of apparently as some of those other isms.
Right.
So like when you're saying all of these things, I'm thinking like these are ageist, but how would you describe ageism? Like this concept of painting everybody with the same brush, assuming, that everybody who hits a certain age is, dependent, the concept of senior, kind of that social construct around dependency or incapable, like all of those are inherently ageist context, but how would you describe ageism?
So the World Health Organization has defined ageism as our biases, our stereotypes, our prejudice, so how we think, how we feel, and how we act towards another person based on chronological age. I would add to that, it's based on what we believe about chronological age. And ageism is not unidirectional. It's not solely towards older people. We see it towards younger people as well, but primarily it's geared towards older people. It's even in the way that we think about the word old. And if you hear me say the word old and you go, ugh, on the inside in any manner of speaking, then likely you've inherited some ageist messages.
For sure. So an example would be a couple of years ago, I walked into Shoppers Drug Mart and I was offered the seniors discount, and I said, oh no, I'm not me, no, like really trying to make a big fuss, and the one behind the counter was like, it's not that much of a stretch, sir. But like I was so hurt
Yes.
because of my inherent latent ageism, because I was being labeled, instead of thinking like either, wow, this person thinks that I'm mature and or thinking like, oh man, I could have saved $10 on my Shoppers Drug Mart trip.
Yes.
I took it as an insult.
Yes.
Right? And that's my inherent ageism shining through.
Well, you think about it even in terms of places that require ID, whatever that looks like. And you
Yeah.
have someone who goes in and they ask for your ID and you're like, this is a good day.
Yeah.
On
What
that
a-
end.
Yeah,
What a
on
great
that
day.
end,
Right,
yeah.
right.
Right? Whereas why is that? And that's the challenge with ageism, is that it is so subversive. Like you said, we don't talk about it like the other isms.
Yeah.
It is both hidden and on the forefront. But it's so subversive that we see it even in birthday cards, right? You go into a Shoppers or Walmart or any of those stores that sell birthday cards and try and find something that's funny, that's positive about aging, and you're gonna find yourself very limited in your selection because it is okay to be derogatory about age when it comes to those things. It wouldn't be okay for any other ism.
Right.
If those birthday
Yeah.
cards had that message, right?
Sure.
If you had a birthday card that said, I didn't know what to get you for, because at your age it usually depends. If that switched to say at your race, it
Yeah,
usually
yeah.
had depends and had a picture of a person who needed to utilize accessible devices or utilize adult diapers, then
Yeah.
we would think that's awful.
Sure.
But we think it's okay because it's about age. So that's why it's not, if hearing this you're thinking, oh man, I thought that, or oh, I can't believe that's been going through my mind. Well, it's everyone. It's
Right.
all of us.
Yeah.
From the time that we were 4 is when we start to get negative perceptions of what it means to get older.
Well, we were talking about my dad's 40th birthday party,
Yes.
you know, which was now 30 years ago. But that, you know, the whole theme of that birthday party was over the hill, and you know, Lordy, Lordy, look who's 40, right? And now, you know, and as someone who's now past 40, I look back on that, you know, whatever. But even still, I look back on that with my
Yes.
latent ageism, thinking like, how dare they make jokes about my dad being old at 40? Because I'm 46 and I'm young and vibrant.
Right.
Yeah.
And even that, it's the term that you're thinking, oh, I don't want to be thought of
Yeah.
as old. I turned 40 in February.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I mean, I've made it. This is the
Yep.
thing with successful aging. You know that you're successfully aging because you're still alive. So
Yeah.
congratulations
Which
to
is
all
better
of us
than the
here.
alternative.
Right?
Yeah.
There we go. The challenge with all of these things is that age is relative to who's in the room. You're 46, I'm almost 40, which means that I'm younger than you here. But when I volunteer with youth, I am older than them.
Yeah.
And some of my 14-year-old youth that I volunteer with, when they found out that I'm almost 40, gave a similar, how can you be that old?
Can I help you to your car?
Yeah, like do you need, what does this look like? We don't understand. And part of it is because of all the messaging that we've had
Sure.
in media, in the world, of what it means to get older. And if it's not negative, it's invisible. And so we have to see it for what it is. That's why these conversations are so important, because we're raising awareness to help people recognize why this is detrimental to all of us.
So I think we've done a really good job of
Introing
shining
that,
the light of
yes.
ageism, and even I think Amanda and myself have had, well, maybe you're more evolved than I, but I've
I'm
had
definitely more evolved.
but light bulbs have gone off for me. But talk to us about how ageism plays into the cycle of poverty. What is the intersectionality between poverty and ageism?
So a recent survey came out that said that recruiters, 40% of recruiters, are under pressure from their employers to hire younger. That 59% of recruiters have demonstrated age bias in the recruiting process, and that just under 50% of recruiters believe that the top age, the age at which you're too old to be hired for a job, is 57.
And with people working further and further into life, right? People
Right, you have to.
Yeah, there's people. It's
Yes.
a privilege to retire at 65, right? Lots of folks working well into their 70s.
Yes.
And if they're in a time of transition, they're behind the 8 ball even before they apply for a job.
It's
Right.
interesting too how much people start, when you get to a certain age, how much people start speculating or asking you when you're going to retire and all those things. Even thinking, I was saying my dad just retired at 70, and people asked him often,
Yes.
you know, like, what's your retirement plans? When are you going to retire? Because it's like this expectation. And he retired. Hi, Dad, if you're watching. But he retired, you know, because he wanted to. But like, could you imagine how that ageist mentality plays into this, like, moving people on at a certain
Yes.
time and based on a certain age?
Yes, so even with that, the question is subversive.
Yeah.
It's this idea of benevolent ageism. What's next for you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What are you going to do now?
Right.
Under the assumption that you're leaving, not that you're staying.
Yeah.
It's this idea that even though forced retirement is illegal,
Yeah.
you can't say you've turned 65, you're out, but subtle forced retirement is not. Changing the workload of people, suggesting that they're of retirement age, determining that now they're when they have appraisals, that there's certainly things that are coming up, but somehow they never came up before
Right.
at a certain age.
Yeah.
And of all the ways that we can address isms, that people can go to court over wrongful termination,
Yeah.
Ageism is the hardest one to prove.
Yeah.
So it's still very evident, and it's those things. So we see it in the workforce in recruitment. Older adults statistically have less training opportunities. They have, and as we get older, we have less opportunity for promotion.
Right.
And then when it comes to retirement, and even in recruitment, you think about employment opportunities that use words like, we are looking for someone who's youthful and vibrant. We are a tech-driven company that is looking for people the same, and automatically what they're saying is,
Not you.
not you. Over 57, do not need to apply.
Yeah.
And that number actually goes down when it comes to tech industry and when it comes to marketing. average ages in marketing are like under 30 for marketing directors. And what marketing is directed towards is generally people 18 to 30, even though older adults can have more spending power. So it's in all of these things. And when you have older adults who are knowing that they need to work, who are willing to work, but cannot get past the recruitment phase because they have their age on their resume, on their CV, then that makes a huge, huge difference. So we're seeing people who are carrying this weight of I want to work, but I can't get a job.
Or I need to work.
Or I need to work.
I mean, and that's
Yes.
probably even the more
Yeah.
critical. I mean, it's not to diminish the impact of someone who wants to work, but someone who actually needs to work, and they're over 57, so they're not even getting through the screening process.
Right.
And so then what happens?
It does happen.
Right. So then what happens next? Right.
Yeah.
So then we find people in the cycle of poverty,
Yeah.
and you internalize it. If you hear enough, you are not valuable to me because of this thing about yourself that you cannot change, then that becomes demoralizing. You don't want to keep applying for jobs. And so you find yourself in this position that you might need to, you might want to, but you cannot get through the door. People are being advised, don't put the ages, the dates in which you had these experiences. And how many of us have heard the term, they were overqualified?
Yeah, a lot.
Right.
Yeah.
And that has to do with the number of years that you've been in the workforce.
Yeah.
And if you're overqualified, you can't change that.
Yeah.
You can't change the number of years you've been a manager or the number of years you've been in your position unless you lie about it.
Yeah.
So what we're saying to people who need to work, who are willing to work for less than what they're valued at because they need to work, is that too bad. At one point you made too much money and now we can't even consider you. That seems ridiculous to me. The logic isn't even there. And the challenge too is even with HR managers. Ashton Applewhite, who wrote a book called This Chair Rocks, she talked about this in an interview, that even HR managers who would say older adults are great to work with, they bring experience and knowledge, and they really help the environment. And it's not to say that younger people don't bring experience and knowledge, but they'll say all these positive things about older workers and still say, but I won't hire them. What does that say about our culture? What does that look like? So
It's interesting how media also plays into some of those pieces about like what ageism looks like in the workplace. There's ageism in terms of hiring practices, and then we have, which contributes to the cycle of poverty, and then we have ageism in the workplace, which also impacts people's mental health, how they feel about themselves, can contribute to financial insecurity because people are struggling in the workplace. And Jen and I have talked about this before, but there's lots of stuff on TikTok that, separates how different generations work, right? And really paints that baby boomers in a certain way of like unchanging. Okay, boomers, like a huge thing, right? It has massive impacts on, actually I got asked to run a workshop on fostering a dynamic workplace because they're having issues in the workplace navigating generational challenges. Like that was the actual feedback, right? And it's so interesting how, because I'm evolved now, we listen to and I listened to Jenna talk about ageism. Like 5 years ago, I may have not thought twice about that, and I thought I would have just run the workshop. But now I thought, oh, there's like inherent ageism even in that context. Sorry, I'm getting off track. But the point is, when we're thinking about the cycle of poverty with older adults, it's impacted from the hiring practice, but it's also impacted around ageism in the workplace.
it is, and it's impacted by a societal structure that does not see the value of older adults. Down to brass tacks, there was a study that showed that if just 8%, if there was an 8% increase of people aged 54 to 69 in the workplace, that would increase Canada's GDP by $54 billion a year.
Whoa.
Right? $54 billion, that's huge. But because we are looking at people and seeing chronological age as a determining factor of whether they're hireable, we're not just affecting individuals, we're affecting our society as a whole. Like down to dollars and cents, we're affecting our society as a whole.
I have a question, and this wasn't a pre-written question, so I actually, I don't know if this makes sense at all. But I'm wondering, we're talking about ageism in the workplace. I'm wondering also, is there an intersection with sexism? Like,
Yes.
Maybe if you could explain to me, or explain to us and our viewers and listeners at home, the intersection between sexism and ageism, and how that shows up in the hiring process as well, if there's any data around that.
There is. Now, I don't know the numbers, but again and again and again, women have the hardest time getting a job their entire lifespan.
And so that's the same as an older women would have a harder job applying for a job than an older man.
Statistically speaking, globally, the
Yeah.
poorest of the poor are older women of color. And it's all that intersection. It all comes together. And so we see it play out in all these other isms. And when I first started talking about ageism, I had people say to me, another ism.
Right.
But the reality is that we have to address them all. We have to look at them and say, how can we value individuals in all these different realities? Because otherwise, if we address one, we're still facing the other realities of isms. So, yeah, I mean, we've seen that in different avenues where women are let go of their jobs at an earlier age of men because they look older. And what that looks like too. And the challenge is that we have internalized ageism, and the way that we speak to each other about getting older, it all plays out. And so when you have a colleague or friend who comes in going, I feel so old today, looked in the mirror and man, I don't know what happened here, and things are where they weren't before. Like all of that stuff, when we hear that, we internalize it, and it continues on this culture that it's okay to be biased against people based on their age. I mean, ideally, it would be great if chronological age could be something like your hair color, well, maybe not your hair color, because that often brings up ageist ideals, right? But your eye color or your height. Like I could say, hey, I'm Jenna, I'm 5'11", I've got blue eyes, and I'm almost 40 years old. And if we thought about hiring practices, if someone saw my picture and said, ooh, she's got blue eyes, not hireable, that would be ridiculous.
Right.
And so if we could have that same thought process when it comes to age, then that's going to make a difference. It's going to benefit individuals. It's going to increase people who are able to have jobs, because we know housing is out of this world right now as far as prices. Groceries are hard to come by. And the structure that we have in place to support older adults was never meant to actually support older adults. When the old age pension was put in place, the life expectancy of older adults was 57. And that hasn't really changed, but we're living longer. So something needs to change.
I think that kind of touches on those kind of systemic, age-based policies and practices that are in place that perpetuate ageism, but then also really contribute to that cycle of poverty, right? It's a huge thing.
Well, and because you have older adults who then have heard these things all of their lives, you don't have value once you reach a certain age.
Yeah.
And so what is going to propel them forward to say, actually, I do have value? And to push against all of the naysayers who say, no, you don't, and no, you can't. And the ways that we've seen it in media, the way that people are shown to be a certain way. If you're older, then you're incompetent, or you're relationally distant, or you're grumpy. The grumpy old man is a trope that has been played out for eons about the man who shakes his fist at a cloud. And even the way that we see it in news. I don't know about other places in Simcoe County, but Barrie has this weird thing where people like to drive their cars into the front of buildings. I don't know if you knew that. Yeah, it's happened on more than one occasion. But when you look at the headlines of that, when that happens, there was a headline that said, woman drove her car into the front of a building. Another headline that said, senior woman drove her car into the front of a building. And what those things are both perpetuating is this idea that women are bad drivers and that older people are bad drivers. Yeah. And so we have all this messaging that we take in, and then it contributes to the resources that we can access, the resources that are available, all of the different ways that we can help people bridge out of poverty, but that is no longer accessible because of a chronological age.
Yeah. Which is so interesting because even when you think about those headlines, like why is age or sex even relevant to the story in the sense that just a human drove their car into a building? Like
And
that should be it. you
Maybe
know?
we should look into why is this a thing in Barrie? like that seems important to me.
Right.
You touch a little on internalized ageism,
Right.
and I think it's important to kind of talk about how that really impacts physical and mental health, because those are also things that impact poverty, right? When we
Yes.
have a decline in our physical health and we have a decline in our mental health, that those are risk factors for experiencing poverty. So I wonder if you could speak about that.
Yeah, so internalized ageism, as I mentioned earlier, it starts young. It starts at an age where we start to look at older people and determine what is old and what that means. And a lot of the times when I've asked people to describe the word old, what does that mean? What words come to mind? It's usually negative: frail, useless, out of touch, not up to the challenge, stuck in their ways. And then if I ask people to use that word to describe how they would want to describe themselves, right? If I asked you, when you are old, whether that is today, tomorrow, or however far away that needs to be for you, what are some words that you want to describe yourself?
Go ahead.
Yeah. Like
Accomplished.
Ooh, good word.
Happy.
Happy. Love that.
Secure.
Yeah.
Great. How about you?
Competent,
Great.
probably wise. Yeah, I was at a workshop Jenna did about this, and someone yelled "sexy" from the background. I like that.
Yeah. And
Or
then,
it's like, oh, yeah, we still want to be attractive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
totally, we do. And because the messaging that we get is primarily negative, but if you ask individuals the value that they want to be seen as
Yeah.
is positive, there is a discrepancy there. There's something that we have to fix that. So first, in order to address internalized ageism, we have to know where the messaging has gone wrong and understand who benefits, because it's not us. We don't benefit from a multi-billion-dollar industry that tells you that your wrinkles are going to make you less valuable. We don't benefit when anti-aging cream tells you that if you slather this on your face, then you will be hireable and everybody will love you. Like that, we don't benefit from that.
Yeah.
Fear-mongering and marketing benefits. So this internalized ageism, this idea that as we get older we have less value, is something that we've heard all of our lives. It can look like, my knee hurts, I'm getting old. But your other knee is just as old, so maybe that's not the problem.
Right.
It also comes out in mental health, where you have to bear this burden of feeling like you have less value based on something, again, that you cannot change. You can't go back in time and go, oh, well, I'm gonna just push my birth year up ahead a few years. And the cost of that is vast. So there was a study that out of the States that tried to figure out how much ageism cost healthcare systems. And they determined that ageist attitudes and belief cost healthcare $63 billion a year.
So interesting.
Because internalized ageism prevents people from getting the care that they need.
Right.
Internalized ageism of medical professionals, both of counselors and of doctors, means that people go undiagnosed, underdiagnosed, or overtreated. That we're seeing things like mental health being attributed to, well, that's just because of your age.
Right.
But studies have shown that depression is actually not a normal part of aging. So if we could treat some of those things, the mental health things, then that snowballs into all of these other areas and what that looks like. The positive side of this, here's the flip side. Becca Levy did a study out of Yale, and she presented people with positive words about aging and negative words about aging and neutral words about aging. She did it on a computer screen, so fast that you couldn't determine what you're seeing. It just went into your subconscious. And what she found was that people who had positive age beliefs, just briefly showed to them, did better physically on a walking test, had better recall on a memory test. And this was just a brief interaction with positive age beliefs. So by just listening to this podcast, by just watching this, there's people out there who are going to find that their mental health actually gets better from this brief interaction because they understand that it's not them. that they aren't the problem, that we aren't the problem when we get older. We're in a society that tells us otherwise. Becca Levy also did a longitudinal study that found that people with positive age beliefs lived on average 7.5 years longer. That's putting aside medical or health challenges, putting aside demographics, 7.5 years longer. For me, that's the difference between my niece being 11 and being almost 19, and how much I can interact in her life in all of those things.
Jenna, this has been awesome. As we wrap things up, our one final thought or one last thought, how can we as individuals combat societal stereotypes and the misconceptions about older adults that may contribute to their economic marginalization? This is your mic drop moment.
It starts with me, and it starts with you. We have to ask, why do we believe what we believe? And when we start addressing it internally, then we're going to see that spread out to interpersonally. We're going to see that spread out to society. But it starts with us. If we want to see a better future for ourselves and for the ones coming after us, we need to make a change today. We need to start by asking, why do I believe that getting older means that I have less value? And then realize that we have value, and the future is full of opportunities and not just liabilities.
Ageism, as your shirt says, is getting old.
Yes.
Super old.
It sure is.
Jenna Wickens, thank you so much for joining us today. So Jenna Wickens is the Mature Minds Coordinator at CFS Counseling and Wellbeing. Thanks also to our studio partners here at Rogers TV Barrie. And thanks, of course, to you, our viewers and listeners at home, for joining us.
We'll see you next time on episode 8, our season 2 finale, when we discuss resilient futures, empowering communities, and transforming lives.
And just a reminder that not only is the show available on Rogers TV, but it's also available on our YouTube channels and wherever you find your favorite podcasts.
I'm Amanda Fellows of CFS Counseling and Wellbeing with my co-host Brian Shelley of United Way Simcoe Muskoka, asking you to embrace innovative change to ensure communities are great places to live for everyone. Thanks for tuning in.
Thank you. That was awesome.
Yeah, it was
That
great.
was
Thank you
super.
so much.
Yeah, it was a really
awesome.
good conversation.
Yeah.
Cool.